In a world that constantly demands attention, validation, and emotional reactions, Michel de Montaigne offered a quiet rebellion. He suggested that life becomes clearer, lighter, and strangely more meaningful when a person stops caring about the things that never mattered. Not apathy, not cold detachment, but a deeper kind of freedom. A freedom rooted in inner stability, in humility, and in a gentle trust in the natural unfolding of life. He believed that people suffer not from circumstances themselves, but from the weight of their expectations, their fears of judgment, and their endless attempts to control what was never theirs to control in the first place. Letting go is not giving up. It is returning to sanity. This philosophy did not emerge in comfort. It came from illness, political violence, and the chaos of Montaigne's environment. But he discovered something profound. When a person releases their grip on reputation, on outcomes, and on the unnecessary drama of society, everything begins to arrange itself more harmoniously. He wrote not as a distant academic, but as a human being studying his own soul. His journals became an extended conversation with his fears, his pride, his insecurities, and his illusions. Through these reflections, he found a strange truth. The more desperately one tries to appear strong, the weaker they feel. The more a person clings to control, the more chaotic life becomes. And the more one obsesses over what others think, the more invisible they become to themselves. Montaigne suggested a radical reversal. He believed that a person should stop caring about being impressive and instead focus on being honest. That one should stop worrying about being admired and instead become at peace with being misunderstood. And above all, that a person should stop measuring their worth through the eyes of strangers and return to the only place where clarity exists, the self. This is not withdrawal from life. It is the beginning of real participation, because when a person stops caring about the noise, their mind becomes quiet enough to hear what truly matters. This is where everything begins to fall into place. He wrote that most of the suffering people carry is not born from reality, but from imagination, from projecting fears into the future, from rewriting past events, and from assuming that other people are thinking about them far more often than they actually are. Montaigne believed that freedom begins the moment a person realizes they do not need the world's approval, nor its permission to live honestly. And so he offered a simple but transformative idea. If a person learns to stop caring about the unnecessary burden society imposes, they create room for wisdom, calm, and self-understanding to grow. This is the quiet power of letting go. It is not an escape from life, but a return to it. Part 1. The weight of caring too much. Montaigne saw that most emotional suffering comes from a subtle but powerful mistake. People care too deeply about what they cannot control. They chase approval from minds that are inconsistent. They fear judgment from people who do not know them, and they exhaust themselves in the impossible task of trying to manage the thoughts of others. He wrote that a person becomes enslaved not by chains, but by their own attention. Wherever the mind invests its energy, it becomes bound. And so most people live not according to their own nature, but according to the demands of an audience they will never meet. He observed this even in his time. Neighbors judging neighbors, politicians obsessed with appearances, scholars competing for recognition, people shaping their lives around the shifting opinions of the crowd. And he realized something timeless. A person who cares too much becomes divided within themselves. They live not to experience life, but to curate it. They perform instead of exist. They anticipate criticism before it arrives. They imagine reactions before they occur. And slowly, the mind becomes a battlefield of imaginary conversations. Montaigne believed this was the great tragedy of human behavior. Not the external hardships, but the internal self-torture that comes from caring too deeply about the wrong things. He wrote that a wise person begins to loosen these attachments, not by rejecting society, but by understanding its limits. A crowd cannot give a person identity, praise cannot give a person stability, and reputation cannot give a person peace. He believed that once a person sees this clearly, caring begins to fade naturally, and in that fading, life becomes simpler, lighter, and ultimately more authentic. This is the foundation of letting go. As Montaigne matured in his reflections, he came to an extraordinary realization. We suffer not because life is hard, but because we cling too tightly to how we think life should be. This is where Montaigne begins to diverge from ordinary self-help. He does not say be positive, nor does he say force yourself to care less. His recommendation is far more profound. Become honest about the limits of control. He asks us to picture our mind as a room, small, fragile, and filled with things we mistakenly believe we command. People's opinions, the future, the past, our reputation, outcomes, approval. But in truth, only a tiny portion of life is within our influence. Our choices, our effort, our integrity, our response to events. When we stop exhausting ourselves with the impossible task of managing the world, we discover a strange freedom, a clarity, a lightness. Montaigne writes, "We must learn to desire only what depends on us." This is not indifference, this is precision. It is the understanding that the human heart becomes peaceful when it no longer negotiates with reality. And the moment we let go of that negotiation, everything begins to fall into place. Why? Because when you stop trying to micromanage the universe, you suddenly have energy for what actually matters. Your creativity returns, your courage returns, your self-respect returns. Montaigne believed that caring too much is a form of self-punishment. We tie our self-worth to outcomes, forgetting that outcomes are rarely generated by our will alone. He gives us a simple experiment. Observe where your mind goes when you are alone. If your thoughts revolve around people's opinions, you are living in bondage. If your thoughts revolve around things outside your control, you are living in fear. If your peace depends on external validation, you are living in illusion. But if your thoughts revolve around your own character, your own growth, your own inner alignment, then you are free. This transition, this internal shift, is what Montaigne describes as falling back into yourself. What does that mean? It means you stop outsourcing your identity. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop outsourcing your emotional weather to other people's storms. You become the author of your inner world. And suddenly, life begins to open. Relationships improve because you're no longer desperate for approval. Work improves because you're focused on effort, not perfection. Your mood stabilizes because you're not riding the waves of every external inconvenience. Montaigne believed that this shift is not something you achieve once, it is a lifelong practice. Every day we are pulled outward, toward comparison, toward reputation, toward fear, toward noise. And every day we must return inward, toward stillness, toward clarity, toward the center of our being. This is why Montaigne's philosophy feels so strangely modern. He anticipated the overstimulated, approval-driven world we live in today. He understood that the mind becomes chaotic when it tries to hold everything, and that the mind becomes intelligent when it learns to let go. Letting go is not apathy, it is wisdom, sharpened by humility. It is the realization that life, in its essence, is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. And ironically, the moment you stop caring about controlling every outcome begins to improve. Because your intention becomes cleaner, your actions become clearer, your emotions become calmer, and your perception becomes more truthful. Montaigne calls this the philosophy of natural ease, living without force, living without pretense, living without the anxiety of performance. Imagine waking up with that kind of mind, a mind that does not brace for impact, a mind that does not overthink every social encounter, a mind that does not run from fear but observes it with calm curiosity. This is the state Montaigne practiced daily, not because he wanted to escape life, but because he wanted to live it more fully. And that is the great paradox. When you stop caring about controlling life, you finally begin to participate in it. As Montaigne deepened his reflections, he noticed something subtle. Most people do not suffer from life itself. They suffer from the fear of losing what was never really theirs. Reputation, admiration, certainty, control. These are illusions we chase as if they were oxygen, but Montaigne suggests that the moment we stop clinging to them, we begin to breathe freely. He writes, "The man who fears suffering is already suffering from what he fears." In other words, caring too much becomes a kind of self-inflicted prison. We create imaginary disasters long before anything goes wrong. We anticipate rejection before anyone has rejected us. We feel inadequate before we have even begun. But the moment we loosen our grip, the moment we stop rehearsing catastrophe, peace returns. Montaigne believed that freedom is not the absence of difficulty, but the absence of unnecessary attachment. So what does this look like in everyday life? Imagine a conversation where someone disrespects you. Instead of spiraling into anger or overthinking, you acknowledge the moment, protect your boundaries, and let the rest pass like wind. Imagine working toward a goal without obsessing over the outcome, focusing entirely on the quality of your effort. Suddenly, achievement feels lighter, yet more genuine. Imagine walking through your daily tasks with a mind unburdened by the fear of judgment. Suddenly, you move with calm confidence rather than pressure. This is not carelessness. This is self-respect. Montaigne believed that the person who stops caring does not abandon responsibility, they abandon anxiety. He saw that emotional suffering grows when we attach our identity to things that fluctuate at other people, material possessions, temporary success. But when you root your identity in your own character, your own values, your own inner life, external chaos cannot destabilize you so easily. He describes this through a metaphor. A wise man is like a strong, deep tree. The storms of fortune shake the branches, but the trunk remains steady. This is the essence of Montaigne's philosophy, not detachment from life, but detachment from unnecessary suffering. It is the art of living with an unburdened heart. So how do we reach that state? Montaigne offers an unexpected path: radical acceptance. Acceptance of imperfection, acceptance of uncertainty, acceptance of change, acceptance of the messy, fluid nature of being human. He believed that life becomes lighter the moment we stop arguing with it. He writes, "Let us tolerate ourselves and others as we are." This simple line contains a universe of wisdom. When you stop expecting perfection from yourself, you begin to grow naturally. When you stop expecting perfection from others, your relationships stabilize. When you stop expecting perfection from life, your heart finally relaxes. And that relaxation is not laziness, it is alignment. This is why Montaigne's writings feel like a warm conversation with someone who sees the human condition clearly. He reminds us that the person who stops caring about the wrong things finally has room to care about the right things. Integrity, presence, compassion, self-understanding, inner quiet. These become the pillars of a life that falls into place, without force, without panic, without the exhausting chase for validation. And as we lean into this way of being, something miraculous happens. Problems feel smaller, relationships feel easier, opportunities appear more naturally, and we stop living as if life were a test. We are constantly at risk of failing. We begin living as Montaigne lived, with maturity, curiosity, and gentle amusement at the complexity of human nature.